we could spend an hour on stable coins and digital dollars. I know that you have some time constraints, so we want to move through quite a bit of information in a relatively compressed manner. Yes. Talk about the Digital Dollar Foundation and how you came to dive in with both feet to this particular part of the market, because stablecoins had a breakout moment last year with Libra, and then with the very fast follow-up with the Chinese digital currency electronic payment initiative. So speak to the urgency and why this Digital Dollar Foundation is so important in your mind.
Thank you very much, Ryan. So both Libra and the digital yuan project that China's been embarked upon for several years now are good reasons for the U.S. to say, you know what, we really do need to prioritize the digitization of our own fiat currency. But it's not just for those reasons alone. It really goes back to the analogy I gave earlier that, you look around us, our bridges and our tunnels, our airports, our public transportation systems are all antiquated, in many cases obsolete. In a lot of cases, you need to actually tear down the old structure. And I also feel that we need to look at the architecture of our fiat currency. A lot of what's being developed today commercially are workarounds for the lack of a digital infrastructure for our own fiat currency. And I really think that what China's doing and what others are doing should catalyze us to realize that we need to relook at the architecture of our own currency, of our fiat currency. It is, the use cases are plentiful. One of the ones I love to cite is an immigrant in this country may receive a photograph of their granddaughter back in their homeland and want to send them $20 back. Well, the photograph will appear instantaneously, but the $20 may take 2 weeks to get there at a cost of 7 to 17%. Why can't they just simply email back with the photograph the money? And, if you apply that to the billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of remittances that move in dollars around the globe, you look at the unbanked and communities that we have in our own cities and our own rural areas that we have around the world. A digital dollar would provide a great deal of social utility, but also it's almost like the decision to land a man on the moon. All of the new commercial enterprises that will come out of the science of digitizing a dollar will lead to the launch of any number of new commercial enterprises. China has patented over 80 patents for a digital yuan. They recognize that who builds and engineers and owns this architecture will own the economic future. The United States needs to build that architecture.
Do you think that those patents are defensible? For something this big, it seems almost impossible to actually get into a patent dispute over how you manage your trillions of dollars worth of currency. It's like, and it sounds good in theory, but in reality, there's no way.
I agree, Ryan. But wouldn't you rather be the one who's owning the patent, defending it, than the one who's trying to attack it and who's getting challenged at every juncture, right?
I would. I guess the question becomes, does the U.S. already have an innovator's dilemma? Because, one critique is, well, the dollar is already digitized, right?
The dollar's already electronic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, explain the difference.
Yeah, so I use the difference. What I mean by electronic is, it's still an accounts-based system. Most money basically exists by recording on bank ledgers. And if the bank goes down or the other intermediary goes down, try getting your money, right? Well, of course, we have insurance for that, but it's not the same thing as getting your money. It's electronic. It exists on bank electronic ledgers. But that's not fiat. That's not the same thing as a $100 bill in your pocket or $100 of digital fiat in your wallet. And so what we're talking about is a form of tokenized, digitized fiat currency that enjoys the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, that is legal tender, both in a virtual online commercial marketplace.
You ultimately see this getting commercialized because, I don't think I'm alone in expressing the skepticism. The Chinese socially are able to move at an extremely rapid clip because the government is relatively effective and it's very technocratic. In the US, look at the last major tech initiative, maybe healthcare.gov, which was an unmitigated disaster, right? So you look at Libra and you look at Facebook and some of the other parties that they got around the table, they're some of the best technical minds and economic minds in the world because they have access to that pool of capital. To assume then that any digital dollar initiative is going to be built by the government versus the tech industry, particularly the tech industry in the US, it seems crazy to me.
Right.
How do we bridge the gap? Because that's where I feel like much of the hesitation is right now.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, which is why we'll never do it the way China's do it. When China does something big, whether it's build a blue water navy or to build a digital yuan, it's driven by the Communist Party, right? The Communist Party has recently told 30 million Communist Party members to read a single book about the blockchain. And in that book, it says that the future is a digital yuan future. When Europe does something big, the public sector, the central banks and the other major public sector institutions develop the framework, and then they tell the private sector to innovate to that framework. Mm-hmm. But when we do big things in the United States, whether it's land a man on the moon or build the internet, we always do it as a public-private partnership. Mm-hmm. Government lays out some foundational principles, but it's the private sector that brings the intellectual capability, the engineering capacity, the capital formation capability to bear. I talked a little bit about capital markets, brings our capital markets to bear. And so that's what we're proposing. And that's why we've launched the Digital Dollar Project, to be that private sector partner with the public sector in going forward with this. Having run a government agency and tried to launch a modest AI effort in the agency, and having spent 5 years begging for money to fund it, I know how difficult it is for the federal government to initiate these and institute these and implement such technological programs by themselves. The only way we will build a digital dollar is with a public and private partnership. Having said that, when we do those things, we do them better than anybody else. And so if we do this right, we should be able to build the architecture of a digital dollar in the next digital century to come. And I'd say one other thing. I believe that the presence of the dollar as a reserve currency during the last 2 generations has been a net good, not just for the United States, but for the world. I don't think it was a coincidence. I actually think it was a consequence of the primacy of the dollar as a global reserve currency that led to the last 50 years of enormous wealth creation, an enormous rise out of poverty of hundreds of millions of people around the globe into the middle class. It took place because of the globalization of global markets and of commerce, and that came alongside the prominence of the dollar. I think the generation in front of us still needs a strong dollar reserve currency in the world, but the only way that's going to happen is by digitizing it to be there as a foundational point for digital commerce in the next generation to come.
I have a final question because I want to make sure that we stick to time, as I promised at the onset. How do you see this public-private partnership playing out? Because we have Paxos, we have GUSD, we have USDC from Circle and Coinbase. We have Libra, which is now going to create a digital dollar instead of a basket to start out. There are several implementations. Will one of them win an RFP? Will all of them develop in the same sandbox? What is the outlook for how this plays out in practice over the course of the next 1 to 2 years, which are really the foundational years? And unlike most other U.S. regulatory public-private partnership initiatives, this is more akin to the space race with the Soviet Union than anything, I think, in the last several decades because of how quickly the Chinese are moving. I'm curious how you see that process playing out, given that we always have dysfunction around elections. We always have, a bit of reluctance to move quickly on some of these things, and perhaps our regulators and congressmen are too timid in this regard.
Right, Ryan. So at the core of the Digital Dollar Project is the Digital Dollar Foundation, and it's formed as a not-for-profit, really to make clear that we're not trying to compete with any of the commercial enterprises that you named. What we're trying to do is lead and catalyze movement to creating that new digital architecture for the dollar on which those commercial enterprises will be built. In fact, I had breakfast just yesterday with the Paxos team at my office in New York, talking about how they believe that if we are able to create a digital dollar, it will provide the architectural foundation for all their efforts to create digitized security settlement, digitized clearing, all of the infrastructure of a modern digital marketplace will rely on that foundation of a digital dollar. So they're very supportive of our efforts. So how will it work out? Well, I can't map every step, just as when President Kennedy said, we're going to get a man on the moon, he couldn't have said back then every technological innovation that need to be achieved to get there 10 years later, but you set a direction. And what we're trying to do with the Digital Dollar Project is set some core direction to liaise with people at the Fed, not just at the Federal Reserve Board, but with the Boston Fed, the San Francisco Fed, others within the Fed system that are working on different pieces of this, to work with universities like MIT, like Stanford and others that are working on pieces of them, to help integrate different points of view to find where the consensus point of view is. And we'll be soon announcing, very shortly, in the next few weeks, our advisory board for the Digital Dollar Project, where we're bringing together leading figures, and it's going to be individuals, not institutions, but leading figures from both sides of the political aisle, from this administration, from past administrations, from academia, from ethicists, from commercial enterprise, from commercial banks, from central banks, to bring a broad cross-section of viewpoints to bear to find where are the consensus approaches to developing this and communicating. Again, it's what we did well in the development of the internet. It's what we did well before that with the space race. And I think your analogy is very similar. And an op-ed I did in the Wall Street Journal last fall, I think we are at a Sputnik moment. And I think if, coronavirus aside, whether that caused a delay, I think sometime in the future, you're going to see China moving forward with their efforts. I certainly know that our friends in Europe are moving forward with their efforts. Sweden still soon will be a paper cashless digital fiat economy. And I think as those efforts move forward, the pressure on the U.S. to move forward is going to increase. And we want to be there at the Digital Dollar Project to say, welcome to the team. We've done a lot of the early thinking on this. Let's work together. Let's make this happen. And let's do this.
Well, I think we feel like we're in good hands with Crypto Dad, and that's about as inspirational a rallying cry as I think we're going to get, particularly on the regulatory side. So thank you for joining today and for being so open-minded and proactive about this industry. We'll hopefully do it again real soon, as this is going to be an ongoing effort, as you say, for many years now.
Thanks.
Chris can be found at Giancarlo MKTS on Twitter, at Giancarlo Markets MKTS, and you can catch him at looking for and Gallagher as a senior counsel, but I'm sure he's going to be on the conference circuit pretty soon, and hopefully we'll do something together in the not too distant future. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, peace.